the drums, the trumpeters are tooting, soldiers are saluting, cannon they are shooting, and the motor cars are hooting. Poop, 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 as the toad came Don't want to listen to my songs, eh? There's this enormous git to laugh at. You know, Toad, who lives in Toad Hall. Hello, hello.
Of all the books in the English language, The Wind in the Willows is one of the best known and certainly one of the most loved and reread by children, and by adults too. It was written over 80 years ago by Kenneth Grahame. When Grahame was only 5 years old, his mother died and his father left home, putting him into the care of his grandmother, who lived in the little village of Cookham, on the banks of the River Thames in Berkshire. Later, Grahame came back to Cookham and lived in this house. He loved to rediscover the countryside around it. Sometimes he went into the nearby Quarry Wood that he remembered as a dark and a scary place, and which would come to be the wild wood of The Wind in the Willows. Most of all, he loved to take a rowing boat out onto the calm waters of the River Thames. He dreamed of writing a book for those who keep the spirit of youth alive in them, of life, sunshine, running water, woodlands, dusty roads, and winter firesides. He dreamed of an England with unspoiled countryside and traditional village life, of friendship, innocence, and adventure. As a birthday present to his young son, Alistair, he began to read him his stories of Mr. Toad and the life of the riverbank, which would be remembered forever as The Wind in the Willows.
Company! Hello, you fellows! No, wretched oars.
Now, The Wind in the Willows comes to the screen on ITV this Christmas in a brand new animation feature by the producer of The Snowman, Where the Wind Blows, and The World of Peter Rabbit and Friends.
We're trying to make the definitive film of Wind in the Willows, and I think people will find it's funny and amusing and moving and all the things that that you need to do to entertain people.
That's it. Now don't overthink. Let them catch up with you, fellas. Let them catch up. Don't go too fast.
It's a feature-length program. It's really enormous, in fact, and the planning that goes into it's fairly substantial. But I haven't actually counted the number of people. We'll be between 200 or 300 people working on this production and be at it for the best part of a year.
Let them go.
The animation is introduced by scenes filmed on the river with the distinguished actress Vanessa Redgrave.
I've got my grandchildren with me and I'm reading them the story as we go out one day on the river. And it's their favourite story, so I'd have to read it again and again. I loved The Wind in the Willows. Yes, I was given it to read when I was very young, together with Kenneth Grahame's other two books. I think I read all of them when I was about 10 or something. Yeah, I loved them.
Can you forgive me?
My dear chap, water under the bridge. I say, that's quite funny.
The characters are so lovable, and there's a sense in which we recognise people we know in those characters. We all know a Moley and a Ratty, and we certainly know a great number of Toads.
He's just a maniac. I think that's what I like about him. The others are gentle and nice. Toad is a good person. He's just driven by his vices.
The other aspect of the book, I think, is that wonderful tug-of-war that goes on between the love of home and being there and all its comforts and all the security of it, and the yearning to get away from it, to go on adventures.
Oh, my.
The storyboard is the visual foundation of the film. It sets up the shots, whether you're in close-up or long shots. We use the least number of drawings to put over the intention, but of course there's no movement or anything. It's just like filming Dennis the Menace. We're talking about films involving animals, but in fact, most of the animals in these films, they act like human beings, you know, quite often they wear clothes.
Stop being an ass, Toad.
Jill Brooks, who designed the characters, was very aware of the problem.
The characters haven't got shoulders. They tend to sort of run from their head straight into their bodies. Obviously, animals don't normally wear clothes, and for any child who has ever tried putting on their doll's clothes to the cat, you know how crumpled it looks like under the arms and how tight round the back of the neck of the cat. So obviously we have to adapt it slightly. They are basically English gentlemen, but they do actually revert to an animal instinct, particularly if they're fighting. For instance, we made the Mole, who is a particularly round and cuddly creature.
Mole had been working very hard all the morning, spring cleaning his little home. First with brooms, then with dusters, then on ladders and steps and chairs with a pail of whitewash.
In real life, he is actually quite a sharp-toothed young gentleman, and the same with the other animals, except for Toad, who tries to be ferocious but doesn't manage it.
Oh.
Toad might put on a sort of, you know, thing.
Well, no, that's a bit too... Well, you know Rick from The Young Ones and Richie from Bottom and things. It's that kind of... Except Toad's nice, you see.
They're mostly country clothes, although, of course, Toad wears the latest boating clothing.
And his enthusiasm, his energy, you know. One moment it's caravans, one moment it's cars, and that, the cars. That's just so funny, that idea of this guy, this little guy, little fat guy, in this powerful machine.
I am none other than the famous Toad, motorcar snatcher and prison breaker. Grab him! Stop it! Sit still and you shall know what driving really is, for you are in the hands of the famous, the skillful, the entirely fearless Toad!
Yes, this is the dreaded Sequence 1538. You remember where... I am an animation director. Well, I use a thing called a dope sheet. Why a dope sheet? It's called a dope sheet because it's an Americanism, and dope is information, which is divided into feet of film and seconds in time. Here's the dialogue, and he says...
You surely don't mean to stick to your fussy old river all your life?
Using that track, I write in the instructions to the animator how the character will act with gestures, etc., and how his eye works. I've shown a little drawing there of the sort of eye I want. And then the animator animates the drawing.
You surely don't mean to stick to your fussy old river all your life? I want to show you the world! Stop, will you?
As an animator, my priority is the timing and the acting, and I draw very rough and very fast. A lot of people say it must be an extremely boring job. How can you sit there and draw the same thing over and over and over again? And the usual question is, why don't you use computers? But they don't actually realise the joy of every little subtle movement and the timing and the acting. I have a team of 2 or 3 assistants following behind you will clean up the drawings. The priority is to get the thing moving.
Sound is very important, and you must just listen to the music of the sound. You'd be surprised that half of what people say in real life is less important than the way they say it.
Terror of the wild wood! Terror of the wild wood! Ah! Terror of the wild wood! Ratty! Ratty! Ratty!
Tom, here's 1513 from episode 1. Can you test it for us, please?
Yeah, sure.
So, here we are in the line testing room. Until now, all we've had is a pile of drawings that the animator has done. And this is the first stage at which we see them put together on film, on video at the moment, and to see if the movement actually works. The background layout is already down. So we finished shooting the scene frame by frame, and I'm going to look at it now with Mike to see what we think of it.
Get out of this, you fool! Get out! Oh, please, help
Yes,
me!
seems to work fine. I think so.
Get out of this, you fool! Get out! Oh, please, help me! Help!
The voices that you give to the characters are very important. They make the character believable, or if you get the wrong voice, you can destroy the believability.
We were really lucky because we got the 4 main voices we really wanted to get. Alan Bennett, it seems to belong to Wind in the Willows in one way or another.
I've never been in a boat before.
We then chose Michael Palin, who seemed to fit the sort of crisp, middle-class Englishman that Ratty is.
There is nothing, absolutely nothing, half so much worth doing as simply messing about in boats.
Michael Gambon playing Badger was suggested by our casting lady, in fact, and he's perfect because he's got this lower voice, very gruff bit, and it works very well against the other 2.
Why, Ratty, me dear little man, come along in.
We got Rick Mail in to do Toad, the over-the-top Toad, and he's perfect for it.
This is the finest of its kind ever built. All the fittings planned by myself.
I'm rather like Toad. I'm loud and vain and arrogant. And in the characters I play, I mean, I don't mean normally. Obviously, I'm a nice person. And I've got big buggy eyes and eat flies.
Oh my, oh my.
I'm the art director on Wind in the Willows, and what that means is I take over from the line drawings that the animators do, and I turn everything into colour. I came up with an idea of having a sort of soft feel to the film because there's lots of landscapes and English countryside, and it's quite a lyrical feel to the book, so we thought we'd go that way rather than a sort of more cartoony style.
Onion sauce. Clear the way. Did you see that?
As the pastel technique works really nicely for the outside stuff, all the sort of English landscapes and riversides and the different seasons. We also have indoor shots of all the animals' homes and dramatic scenes like the dungeon. Maybe this is the first time that we're going to see a whole film with the backgrounds done in pastel. One of the nicer sequences for me to work on was Ratty's dream sequence where he imagines he's going off to the Mediterranean and working the ships.
Way below the down. Yeah. So, coming on board. Ships.
Ratty, where are you off to?
Why, with the rest of them? Seawards first and then on shipboard. To the shores that are calling me.
I do the initial drawings and paintings, and so it all has to come back to me. I'm the one who has to decide, on the spot whether, Mole's teeth should be more yellow or white. And so I get lots of phone calls every day from people scattered around London asking me silly questions.
And in fact, the whole thing is absurd because you don't get water rats rowing boats and wearing clothes. And you find yourself arguing about a tiny detail as to whether that's the kind of hat he would wear, whether the rabbit's hopping properly.
I get these samples from the art director, who's actually designed the colour. Then I have to then analyse the colour, make up colour swatches so that we can mix in bulk for the entire film. So I would make up a swatch like this, finding if that colour works. Once the colours are agreed and approved, and the recipes are in the book, it's very important that the colours remain the same throughout the making of the film. This is Toad's recipe book, so you can see there's his green flesh, his waistcoat, and that's him in the yellow suit, and this is him in the blue stripe, because he has changes of clothes and costume.
How much paint do we need for one character? Well, let's take Mr. Toad. Green, surprise, surprise. Well, you've got Mr. Toad's face, his paws, his feet. Maybe he takes his clothes off at some point. I would say we're going to need about 30 litres. Enough to paint this room 3 times over.
Moly, how can you possibly say it's cheerless?
Now, the painting and the tracing is done on this stuff that we call cell, and it's transparent acetate. The tracers trace this on the front of the cell. Usually, the characters are all traced in one colour, but we've used different coloured trace lines, and it looks great. Then the painters paint on the back of the cell.
Yeah, these cells are being cleaned. Once they've been painted, like this otter, you have to lay them out on black card. And with the trace line, you paint up the trace line, but obviously when it's quite tight like that, you go over the line sometimes. So you put it on the black card to see where the paint's gone over the trace line. And then you scrape it back as carefully as possible, all the way along until the scene's clean, and then you clean it with lighter fuel, and then it's off to the checker.
I'm tracing a mole as he's coming out of his hole. And I'll probably do one of these in about 5 to 10 minutes.
I'm painting Ratty, and this is the final result. This is the colour model that I follow for the colours. I'm putting the darker colours on first, nice and opaque so that the light doesn't shine through. I go through and I do the darkest colour on all the cells, and I do the next colour all the way through. And I'd say I do about 30 cells a day.
In making films, especially animation films, the soundtrack is extremely important. I mean, with animation, it really helps to drive the animation, and even great animation with a bad soundtrack really doesn't work.
I'm called a Foley artist, and basically I put all the sounds onto the animated picture, and if there's footsteps, we footstep and create the sounds for those characters, and if there's rustles or moves with their clothes or their scarves or anything like that, we will also do those moves as well, so you get natural body movements and footsteps, and we also do effects.
Oh.
And they have tin cans and bits of all sorts of extraordinary equipment.
Producing layouts and backgrounds is a bit similar to building a set for the theatre. A layout is really a blueprint for the entire shot. It gives all the information which the animators and the background painters need. Here we see Molly leaving Ratty's house and setting off towards Wildwood in the distance. This shot's interesting because it shows the difference between what Molly thinks he sees and what's actually there. Fear and terror is all inside Molly's head.
Oh, oh, oh. Get out of this, you fool! Get out! Oh, please, help me! Help! Oh, oh, ah. Terror of the Wildwood! Terror of the Wildwood! Ah! Ratty! Ratty! Ratty!
There's a lot of water in Wind in the Willows, and water does all sorts of things like splash, ripple, boil around, and we don't want to have to draw every cell individually. As special effects director, I was asked to devise a gadget, which I call the water box, so that we can make the water happen in camera. And here it is here. It's mounted beneath the camera on the table here. Everything on the top level is in focus. Everything underneath is out of focus. And between there is a level of plastic which ripples through, and right at the bottom again are little pinholes of light against which we pan another cell to make them appear to sparkle.
And here's Ratty going across the river.
That's right. Yeah.
And Mole is here,
yeah.
on the jetty. That's nice. We had to animate boats on water, and that's very difficult for an animator because animation isn't very good at subtle things. So we took a live-action camera to get some reference material. So this is where Mole grabs the oars and
Yes, that's it.
and nearly tips the...
First, you must learn the theory.
Oh, hang the beastly theory. I want to go.
Sit down.
Let go, let go, I say.
No, sit
I'm
down.
determined I shall.
And I'm
Let
determined
go.
you shall not.
Don't be so obstinate.
Don't be such a fool.
I tried to get them to tip it over, but they wouldn't.
Now.
In this business, time is of the essence. You've never got enough time.
We'll get it right next time, don't worry. Look, it's looking good.
At this point, we are behind. Most films always go behind schedule.
Oh, no.
But making a traditional animated film is a slow process that can't be hurried.
Some moonlight on his jacket.
I'm scraping it off with a kebab stick.
The last few months are always a nightmare, day and night, and weekends as well.
I was awake half of last night worrying about it.
Finally, like pieces of a giant jigsaw puzzle, all the completed scenes and processes fall into place to create a classic film.
Oh, my.
Poop, 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 poop. And it sends him into this sort of dream, and because he just loves cars.
Poop, poop. Oh, my. Oh, my.